Right, time now to have a look at stories making headlines in media from around the world. We begin with the New York Times and that largest wildfire in California's history. It's been named the Mendocino Complex. The Northern Californian fires already consumed nearly 300,000 acres of land and forced tens of thousands of people from their homes. The Gulf News looks at Iran and US President Donald Trump's warning to America's trading partners that anyone who does business with the country will not be doing business with the US. The Telegraph leads with former UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, who has rejected calls to apologise for comments he made in an article about Muslim women wearing burqas, insisting he was speaking up for liberal values. The FT says Elon Musk announced on Twitter he might take Tesla private shortly after the Financial Times reported Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund had taken a $2 billion stake in the electric car maker. The news sent Tesla's shares up by nearly 11%. And finally, are you frustrated by difficult-to-understand accents or dialects while on the phone? Well, the Times reports that online retail giant Amazon is developing technology to detect the speech origins of two people in a phone call, then adjust their voices so that each person hears the other in his or her own accent. Your tweets have been coming in on that. I'll share some of them a little later. With me here, though, now is Dr. Stephanie Hare, who's an independent political analyst. Stephanie, good to have you with us.
Hi.
So let's start with the New York Times. This fire, I mean, when you talk in terms of thousands of acres, hundreds of thousands of acres, it's hard to visualise the scale of it. But when you think this is an area now covered by the fire larger than LA itself, you really start to get the sense of the scale of it.
Yeah, it's 454 square miles, and it's difficult because Americans in particular are used to there being wildfires in the West. It's a sort of seasonal thing in the same way we get tornadoes in the Midwest where I'm from, or hurricanes on the east and southern coasts. So on the one hand, we're used to it. It's the scale of it and the fact that it's now no longer just a wildfire season. It's been happening now over the past 10 months. It's starting to become a sort of year-long phenomenon now. And as you rightly say, the scale of the damage and destruction is unprecedented.
And what's interesting is this categorization of it by the president to allow funding to be unlocked, and that's quite significant, isn't it, in terms of the relief efforts and and actually bringing it under control? Yes,
the president's view on this is perhaps not where everybody in California would perhaps like it to be, in the sense that firefighters have been going now for 2 weeks without a break in some cases. We've had to pull in firefighters from other countries to help this, and it hasn't been declared under the label that would free up enough funding to really help with this relief effort.
Oh, well, so there's a further categorization that he could have given it?
Well, I think there's always other ways to get more funding and resources pulled in. So I think that's where this is going. That's the direction of travel.
Okay. Let's take a look at the Gulf News. We're mentioning President Trump just there, and a warning to the US trading partners that if they do business with Iran, they will not be doing business with the US. And this is particularly interesting given that the other signatories to the Iran nuclear deal, the UK, France and so on, have said they will stick by the deal. And so they could potentially find that companies there are having difficulties in the US. How do they get around this?
Well, this is a complete nightmare, and it's the sort of thing that you would absolutely want to avoid if you're a multinational company and you're trying to operate in different markets. You don't want to be having to take the United States government to court because you think you have the backing of your EU sponsors, if you will, over this in terms of where your jurisdiction lies. It's a disaster of diplomacy and not great for business. It may also be a technique and a tactic on the part of President Donald Trump, so let's see if he actually sticks with it. He may get some pushback and then decide to do his European interlocutors a favor by dropping that in a few months' time. We don't know.
Well, I suppose he has to kind of make this sort of threat or warning for his decision to actually have the impact that he wants it to have on Iran.
Exactly. He often likes to go in hard and then walk it back and act as though he's giving a concession. That's one of his negotiating tactics.
Let's take a look at the Daily Telegraph. This is stirring a lot of controversy. The comments by the former British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson about the full face veil. and he seems to be very insistent that he will not apologise.
Well, I guess the question is, does he have to apologize? He has the right to say what he likes, and other people have the right to say that they find it offensive or that they disagree with the tone. And all this does is create a lot of headlines for him and keeps people thinking about him, despite the fact that he resigned from being foreign secretary recently. And perhaps more importantly, keeps them from scrutinizing his record on Brexit talks and negotiations and promises that he said would be fulfilled and may not be fulfilled. It's a really wonderful diversionary tactic for him from perhaps more important issues.
And I suppose this is the sort of freedom to make controversial comments that comes with leaving government.
Yes, and I think it's playing with identity politics. It's a man talking about how women should be allowed to dress, which is always going to get headlines, and it has us talking about it now. And I guess my point would be, what does it have us not talking about?
That's what, yeah. As a political analyst, that's very, very good point. But I suppose the interesting thing is we know he's got these ambitions, even though he perhaps has put them on the back burner for a while to become prime minister. But if someone makes comments that could potentially alienate large swathes of the electorate, does that harm political fortunes, do you think?
Well, and it's also a question of, is it a sign of desperation when you have to reach for identity politics or say something just to be deliberately controversial? Again, I would encourage anyone who's really interested in looking at his chances as potentially prime minister, which I know he is interested in doing, to look at his economic policy and see if he can deliver on that.
OK. Financial Times, Elon Musk, in a tweet, sending the Tesla share price soaring by saying he would think about taking the company private. Interesting that it was done via Twitter rather than official regulatory filing.
Yeah, Twitter's really become a really interesting social media platform. It's kind of becoming more like a record, right? So we know that President Donald Trump loves to communicate to people directly via Twitter. And here we have the case of a CEO of an electric car company making statements. And he's done this in the past, so we have to also judge this against his track record. He likes to joke on Twitter. He likes to sort of insult people on Twitter. He likes to just play games and pun on Twitter. So whether or not this is serious is actually going to be more important for the Securities and Exchange Commission in the United States, because they need to see if he's actually saying this and being honest with the market.
And they had this revelation about the Saudi wealth fund taking a stake in Tesla, which could come at a very necessary time.
Indeed. So one of the things that's really interesting about Tesla is it's got this fantastic brand and buzz about it, yet it has failed to turn a profit, right? So it loses money and it burns through cash, and it needs cash right now very badly. So the Financial Times came up with this scoop yesterday that the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund had taken a $2 billion stake in the company, and that's right below the 5% threshold where they would have had to make a public declaration about it, right? So that's why it was really exciting to get the scoop and then to have Elon Musk tweet that he was considering taking the company private. Now, the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund is now one of the top 8 investors in Tesla. So they just got a really nice cash injection there. Whether or not he then takes it forward is anyone's guess.
I'm sure watch the twists and turns with interest. This one in the Times, you say tomato, I say tomato, we can both understand each other. Why do we need Amazon to adjust our accents and dialects on a phone call? What do you make of it?
Well, on the one hand, if somebody chooses to use Amazon technology and wants to use this because they find it helpful for them, that's capitalism. I guess the technologist in me is concerned that this is just another way for Amazon to take people's voice data and use it for other purposes. And there are real privacy implications for that, as well as deep fakes, so that we could actually start to fake your voice.
Well, this is the way they say they would develop the technology, is by using audio gathered potentially from millions of the digital assistant, the Alexa devices in people's homes, and that's where the privacy issues come in.
Yeah, and I guess here it's an issue of consent. So here in the United Kingdom, we know that HM Customs and Revenue took 5 million people's voice data without their consent, and that's now being looked at as a legal matter, right? Amazon would say, if somebody's choosing to do this, if they give their consent to do this, then we have the right to do whatever we want to do with that data. It's been handed over in exchange for a service.
We've had lots of tweets on this, actually, Stephanie. It's provoked a lot of thoughts, and Janet got in touch to say, why don't they actually use their great wealth to design and create something that helps people and is useful? Dialects are good and shouldn't be erased. Chris thinks the same, says, what a waste of their technical resources. RJ Key, though, says, good idea. If you're hard of hearing, sometimes it can be much easier if you can hear a voice in your own accent. Range of views there. Thanks very much for all your tweets. Good to get your thoughts. And if you want to keep those coming in, the hashtag BBC The Briefing. Stephanie, good to have your thoughts as well.
Thank you.
That's where we'll leave the newspaper review for now. But thanks very much. We'll see you soon. And we'll see you soon.